All right, everyone, here we go again. Welcome back to the best weekly true crime podcast on the market, The Game of Crimes with Murph in the Morning. And welcome to episode 145 with another fantastic guest. I'll tell you more about him in a few minutes. But you know what? If you listened to last week's episode, you probably know who we're here from today. If you didn't listen to last week's episode, why not? You're slipping and falling behind here. Come on, catch up. First, let's get some housekeeping out of the way. Head over to Apple or Spotify and hit those 5 stars. It might not sound like much to you, but you know what? It really helps us out with the ratings. I appreciate if you do that. Continue to send me your comments and feedback. I love hearing what you think about everything. And I want to say special thanks to those of you who've taken the time to let me know what you think about the shows, the guests, and slowly improving my editing skills. I'm slowly getting there. Also, check out our website at gameofcrimespodcast.com. If you haven't visited the site yet, this is where you'll find all of our episodes, our book list, some merchandise, and more. You know what? As an update, Connie is creating some new items for the merchandise list. She's working on new designs, new logos, new artwork. There's going to be a larger selection to choose from than there was before, so stay tuned for more info on that. We're hoping to roll that out a few items at a time. I'll keep you posted once we get it up and running. It should be very soon. If you're into social media on Facebook and Instagram, you can go to Game of Crimes Podcast. And if you like X, formerly known as Twitter, you can just go to Game of Crimes. So on Facebook and Instagram, it's Game of Crimes Podcast. On X, it's Game of Crimes. But while you're on Facebook, check out the Game of Crimes fan club. That's run by our favorite mafia queen, Sandy Salvato. Show her respect. She's the lady that rules with the iron fist, but she wears a velvet glove, so it's not going to hurt too bad if she smacks you. It's not all about the podcast either. There's a lot of posts and comments there. It's a great place to go if you just want to have a little bit of fun, so go and check it out. If you want even more content, check us out on patreon.com/gameofcrimes. Now, again, a heads up, Patreon is still on hold for a couple more weeks, and my plan is to restart the Patreon channel on June 1st, so stay tuned for more on that. That's patreon.com/gameofcrimes. And one final site I want to tell you about. Many of you already know that my old DEA partner, Javier Pena, and I travel around the world as keynote speakers. This is our 9th year, believe it or not. And this is where we tell the true story about Pablo Escobar and the Medellin cartel. We have a lot of fun doing that. If you're curious about what that is and you want to check us out, you can go to our website. That's DEANarcos, NARCOS.com, DEANarcos.com. There we've got a lot of information, pictures, calendar, merchandise. There's a few other things on there. Basically, you can go there and see how great we think we are, okay? Quick disclaimer, this is a show about crime. We talk about bad people doing bad things and bad people doing bad things to good people. I do take the story seriously, but we're also going to have some fun here, so it never hurts to laugh at yourself, right? And since we're not being serious and we're ready to laugh about some things, it's time for one of my favorite sections, a section dedicated to stupid criminal stories. You know what time it is. It's time for Small Town Police Splatter. Woohoo! Okay, first story up. A New Jersey business owner wore a jacket bearing his name and phone number when he stormed the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021. Robert Copatelli, 27 years old, was arrested Wednesday and charged with 4 misdemeanor counts of unlawfully entering the Capitol with the goal of disrupting the session of Congress. Although Copatelli's face was fairly disguised by a mask and a hat, the business owner's name was clearly visible on his left breast and plastered across his back. This is so funny, I can't even get through it. The business owner allegedly spent 12 minutes walking through the stormed building before crawling through a broken window and vanishing. Investigators easily tracked down Copatelli's business, which is registered with the U.S. Department of Transportation at the same Toms River address where Copatelli just happens to live. Notably, the company's logo matched the text and artwork, which contained a large American flag shown on the suspect's jacket. This is the best part. Copatelli could not be immediately reached for comment. Well, I don't think I'd want to comment about that either. How much stupider can you get? Next story. In Long Island, a scientist copped to running a Breaking Bad-style meth lab that initially landed on police radar when he called about a break-in at the facility last year. Matthew Lashinsky accidentally called the cops on himself when he dialed 911 around 3:30 a.m. on June 7th to report a burglary in progress at his purported establishment known as Quantitative Laboratories. When Suffolk County Police got there and searched the scene, officers found broken glass at the entrance to the lab, a facility which they eventually realized was secretly manufacturing and pumping out methamphetamine and other controlled substances. More than 100 items of lab equipment, chemical reagents, and solvents that go into meth were found. along with over 3 ounces of meth, 625,000 milligrams of pure ketamine, and 20 plastic jugs containing GBL, which is similar to the date rape drug known as GHB, which, if you don't know, is concrete cleaner. There's something you want to put in your system, isn't it? The cops also found about $40,000 there. Now, Lashinsky says on his LinkedIn page that his laboratory analyzes cannabis, but strangely, they found no cannabis there. Though he admitted to manufacturing the potent and deadly drugs, his lawyer attempted to paint a positive picture of his client. Of course he did. It's smoke and mirrors. My client is a brilliant scientist who's examining drug addiction for the public good and denied he sold meth out of the lab. What do we call that? We call that bullshit. The Farmington resident overall pleaded to 13 charges tied to the case, including multiple counts of criminal possession of a controlled substance and an unlawful manufacture of meth. All right, ladies and gentlemen, what's the number one rule on a game of crimes? Don't do meth. I guess he hasn't listened to our show. And our last story, a fugitive wanted for fraud was busted when she walked into a New Jersey sheriff's office and asked to be hired. Zema Johnson, 27 years old, a former postal service worker from Jersey City, was on the run for the crime in Monroe County, Pennsylvania, when she applied to work at the Hudson County Sheriff's Office. She sent in paperwork to be a security guard at the law enforcement agency. So what they did is they called her in the station under the guise of a job interview, and guess what happened? She got arrested. After the alleged foolhardy fraudster was busted, the officers allegedly discovered 2 stolen credit cards, and she was also hit with credit card theft charges. And prior to applying for a job, she was also wanted on 10 bench warrants for failure to appear in court on traffic charges in Jersey City. And what do we call that? We call that a freaking idiot. Okay, hope you enjoyed those stories there. Now for today's guest. I mentioned last week's episode, that was with Jenna Griffith, and that was fantastic. I mean, I've gotten a lot of positive comments from our listeners out there. Well, this week's guest is Seth Griffith, her husband. Now, this is the first time Game of Crimes has had back-to-back episodes with a wife and husband team. And I got to tell you, both of these people are heroes in every sense of the word. These two are the proverbial dynamic duo. I haven't seen it with my own eyes, but I'm pretty sure they could probably leap tall buildings in a single bound if you were ever a Superman fan. Jen and Seth both set the standard for others to follow, and in my humble opinion, they represent what's good in our world. Okay, time for me to shut up so we can get on with today's guest. So now, if you're ready, you know what you got to do. You got to get in, sit down, shut up, and hold on. Here we go with the biggest, baddest, most dangerous game of all, the Game of Crimes. Well, hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Game of Crimes with Murph in the Morning. I'm so excited to be back with our guest today. And if you recall last week's episode, we had a young lady on here, Jenna Griffith. You heard her story. If you haven't, you got to go back and listen to it. It's one of the best ones we've had so far. That lady, what she's been through, and to suck it up and not sit back and feel sorry for herself. She's making the best out of life that she can, and it's gotten to the point where she's dramatically helping other people that I call the unsung heroes, and that's the families of our military veterans and our first responders who we expect to sit home and take care of business. You know, Connie was the same way. She had to take care of the girls. She had to take care of the house. She had to take care of maintenance on the cars. When the power went out or the plumbing was screwed up or whatever it might be, she just took it on to keep that off of my plate because, you know, I was out doing what I thought was God's work. I still think it was God's work. But the reality is I was out having fun because it was exciting, it was dangerous, and I loved what I did. And so what happens is us heroes, we think we're heroes, superheroes, we get all the credit for everything. And our families are just sitting back left to kind of hold the bag, and it's just not fair. And so when I speak to audiences now, especially if it's a fundraiser or it's a gala affair or whatever it might be, such as a military appreciation weekend in Beaufort, South Carolina a couple months ago, I always bring up the unsung heroes. I make that part of my little talk. They deserve the credit. They deserve the recognition. Last year, I was the keynote speaker at the Orlando Police Foundation, their Blue Line Gala for the year, their big fundraiser. And I recognize the cops, you know, past and present. I have them stand up, let everybody see them. But then I always recognize the unsung heroes, and I ask the families to stand up. And when I do that, you wouldn't believe the appreciation and the applause that they get. And when you talk to them afterwards, they all thank you for recognizing them. And they say that's never been done before. So, you know what, by crackies, we're going to do it here on Game of Crimes. We're going to recognize our unsung heroes. And Jen is a leader in that realm. Well, now, if you did listen to her episode, you probably got a good idea who today's guest is because we talked about it. We have today a gentleman by the name of Seth Griffith, and that just happens to be Jenna's husband. If you heard, and just in case you didn't hear last week's story, I met Jen and Seth in South Carolina a couple months ago at the Corps Medical Group 3rd Annual Military Appreciation Weekend. And if you have heard me talk about it, I was in awe of these people. I mean, you talk about a tent full of studs and studettes. It was just, I've never seen that many service dogs in my life. It was amazing, the people there, their attitudes, their personalities, what they've done in life is things that they make movies out of. People that, like you and me, probably never get to meet most of these folks. I got to do a keynote address. I can stand in front of thousands of people and not be nervous at all. But in front of these people, I felt like I was out of place. I was in such awe of these people. I can't think of a better word to explain it because of what they've done. So when I met Jenna, she was the first speaker, and I heard what she was doing. I thought, man, I really like that. And I mentioned her when I got up and did my little keynote, and she came up afterwards and thanked me. And this big burly guy with this big, he's got more hair on his face than I got, I think, on my entire body. He's got one of these beards that it looks like you could probably shave his beard off, and I could make a toupee out of this guy's beard. And see, we're doing this interview remote, so he can't reach through the screen and kick my ass right now. Because I might get slapped for some of the things I just said to you. But brother Seth Griffith, welcome to Game of Crimes. I can't tell you what an honor it is to have you on here, brother.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. And you did a good job of explaining the core medical event. And I've definitely outkicked my coverage with Jenna. I definitely had to go through some trials and tribulations to end up meeting my purpose partner. And I met her, and we were hoping to impact a lot. We're already impacting lives. We're going to impact a lot more.
That's outstanding. And for our listeners here, you may hear there's a little, I'm going to try to take these gaps out. But Seth, when we were talking just before we started recording this, we discussed this gap. But he brought something to my attention that I hadn't heard of, consideration for a pause before you speak. Can you tell us just very quickly, Seth, a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it's very powerful if you can practice a pause, a 2.5 second pause, personal interaction, stressor, just practice that pause, if anything, to collect yourself and to make sure that you're listening and you're not responding, listening to respond. Like I said before, be quick to listen and slower to speak so that people are heard. And I'm speaking to myself, and I say that to you. A lot of guys need to hear this.
Yeah, well, I know you've listened to part of Jenna's interview. Our listeners will tell you I'm pretty quick to speak. I engage my mouth before I engage my brain a lot of times. And a lot of times I'm sorry for what comes out of it. But I just want our listeners to be aware of that. So this is not me screwing up the techniques, although I might do it anyway. But I love the fact that ladies and gentlemen, this is a true American hero. This is a patriot we're talking to today. This is not somebody that just, couldn't find a job anywhere else and decided to come on the show and make something. This is a guy who's been there and done that. Wait till we get into all the things he's done and what he's doing now. And I think you'll agree with me 100% here. But the fact that you brought that to my attention, I'm sure when Connie listens to this, she'll probably say, hey, you could learn something from Seth there. Shut your mouth for a little bit. She's a tough girl. She cuts me no slack. Seth, just to get us started here, tell us where you grew up and if you got brothers and sisters and where you went to high school. Did you play sports in high school? That kind of thing.
Yeah, crazy story. It gets a little crazier towards the end. Anyways, I'll just jump into it. So I grew up in St. Louis suburbs. Typical family. Dad was, my stepdad that raised me was retired, Air Force. And, so he was pretty strict and ran a pretty tight ship, if you will. Did play sports, was pretty athletically gifted. I forget, what year it was, but there was one summer where I think it was like between like 5th and 6th grade where just all of a sudden I just could run faster and could do everything. Things came natural to me, like tactile things. I was able to be good at doing stuff, whether it be sports or riding motocross or, what have you. If I wanted to do it, I could pretty much just kind of pick it up and just do it. So grew up in St. Louis suburbs. I I have a younger brother, Josh, half brother that I grew up with, and he and I are so different. I can probably just leave it at that. It's a super long story. I don't have enough time for, but not super close. I have two other brothers and this is where it kind of gets crazy, Alex and Perry. They're my half brothers. So my name on my birth certificate was Seth Akiva Kransberg, and I was adopted by my stepfather, and I became Seth Herbert Griffith. And, you know, I'm going to try to keep this straight because it's kind of an interesting story when we start talking about some of the missions, specifically Ukraine, down the road. But I always knew that, you know, my biological birth father was Jewish, and I knew his name was Sheldon, lived in the Kansas City, Missouri area. So I reached out on Facebook to, I found an Alex on there, Alex Kransberg. I said, hey, do you know my dad? I'm looking for a Sheldon Kransberg. And he's like, yes, I know him. He's my father. How do you know him? So that was kind of interesting. And then he actually went to his mom and Sheldon, our dad, divorced years ago. Sheldon just wasn't meant to be a father. Just not in his DNA. So he went to his mom and said, hey, so this guy Seth reached out to me, and his mom wasn't shocked at all and was kind of like, yeah. And I can't remember the exact exchange, but she said basically, hold on, went into like whatever, you know, she had or safe or whatnot. And she had this paperwork still from like years ago from the courts in St. Louis for paternity testing. Cause I was going to be I would have been, I think, the firstborn grandson. And, you know, it turns out that, you remember when you would run checks through back in the day at the store, and it would run it through the thing. It would go loop in and loop back out, and it would imprint something on it. Turns out my grandfather invented that thing. And my dad, Sheldon, did sales all around the country doing that. So he's just, you know, like I said, just wasn't it wasn't just built to be a father, or, you know, mentor in that way. So let me back up a second. Alex reached out to Sheldon, you know, our dad, and said, hey, this Seth guy reached out to me. Sheldon's super upset. You know, he was like, wait, we don't know what's going on, blah, blah, blah. His mom didn't show up to the paternity testing. My mom was afraid that they were going to try to take me, you know, because they had all this money. My mom really, you know, she was, you know, struggling. She just graduated high school and wasn't in the same position they were in. So we did this DNA testing. And if you're siblings with the same father, but different mothers, there are 16 male chromosomes that'll be identical. Okay. And, you know, we did the saliva, and I forget what else we did. And we sent it off, and it took weeks. I felt like I was like, you know, getting ready to be on the Jerry Springer show. And, you know, the results come back in. I don't know if you've probably looked at DNA before or seen it at some level and some kind of evidence or something. It's, you know, it's these lines and it's all this stuff in there. And then I'm kind of trying to decipher it. And I always know, like, just from my military background, like the legends at the bottom, right? The legend for the map, you know, whatever. So find what's explaining what this is. There's going to be some notes in there. And I go to the very bottom, and I you know, right there it is. We shared those 16 genes, the same or chromosomes. So I called up Alex. I think I got mine first, and I was like, hey, what's going on, brother? So we just got confirmation. And then I was getting ready to deploy to Afghanistan for one of my several deployments. I was on the ride mower, you know, it was like just kind of a mindless thing. Just go out there, put a podcast in or whatnot, and just mow the grass. And I got a call from a Kansas City number that wasn't Alex, and it wasn't Perry, you know, my other brother there. And it was my first conversation I had with Sheldon.
Wow.
Like, ever. And I'm 35 years old. Now, fast forward. And that was when I was still active duty. That was 2008, I think.
Wow.
A lot of deployments. So you fast forward, I retired from the military in 2015. And we'll circle back to that here in a minute. Don't let me forget to go back to that. And I think we were in Poland, and this was, you know, when the Russian aggression started happening there, and their special military operation in Ukraine. One of the people we're traveling with, I forget how it got out, but my brother Alex somehow picked up I was in Poland. And he goes, basically, are you going, you know, where we think you're going? And I was like, kind of cryptic a little bit, but like, yes. And he says, like, holy cow. So he's like, can you talk for a few minutes? And we were getting ready to go comms black because we got close to the, not to give away, you know, any of our techniques, but, you know, we were using, you know, different, you know, SIM cards that are Ukrainian. So we weren't putting out any kind of US, you know, signal out there, and we're using our, anyways, before I went into that comm status, I called him and he said, hey, just so you know, all I knew is our family, they fled. The Kransberg family came to the United States through Poland to the UK to New York City, Chicago, and then St. Louis is where Sheldon met my mom. All I knew is they were Western Russian Jews. Turns out they were Ukrainian from Kiev, where we were literally getting ready to, I was getting ready to, millions of people leaving Ukraine. And I'm walking, one of the people walking into Ukraine with a big a big rucksack on and some Pelican cases and just kind of head down low, just kind of trying to hide in plain sight, just not draw any attention. That's going through my head. Like, wow, like this is kind of crazy. Like to write that story.
I'm sitting here with my chin on the table, just in awe of what you're telling me here. Your story about finding your dad. I have a very good friend who's a retired police officer in North Carolina. A lot of our listeners, law enforcement listeners, know him. His name's Kevin Black. Very well known. He's like you. He's a stud. Got muscles on top of his muscles. One of the funniest people you'll ever meet. I met him he was with the sheriff's department there in North Carolina when I was stationed there back in the mid-90s. And we had Kevin on as a show. He was episode 86 that came out on February 20th, 2023. And he's got some hilarious stories. He talks about shitting in his pants and things like that. But you got to come back and listen to it if you never heard it. In the story, and I had already found this out because Kevin and I stay in touch over the years, he did one of the 23andMe tests or whatever those tests are, and identified he was adopted, and he found his birth mom and dad, and they were like the next county over. And Kevin is at retirement age when he finds them, and and he makes no bones about it. His adoptive parents, or that's the parents that raised him. But he went and made contact with his biological parents, and just now he's got two families, and it just it's one of those stories. It's one of those stories that'll bring a tear to your eye. And I think even Kevin got a little bit emotional talking about it, because I mean that's what he's talking about. That's huge that you found your biological dad. Wow.
Yeah. If I sent him a message, Jenna said I slid into her DMs. Meeting her, but I did send Alex a message on Facebook, just basically saying, "Hey, you know a Sheldon Kranzberg?"
Outstanding,
crazy.
And I know, I feel like this. I don't believe in coincidence. I don't believe in luck. I believe that things happen for a reason. I think the good man upstairs has things planned out for us. But what an adventure! Just that in itself is a story. Holy cow. You guys see these things the guests that we have on here, you guys should all be writing books about all your experiences, because, I did one thing and a book came out of a TV show. You guys have multiple experiences that just, I know people would sit back. That's what I think makes Game of Crime so popular, is we're bringing folks on like you, Seth, that are just doing things that other people have no clue about. And we're just scratching the surface here. So now, when you were in high school, did you were into athletics as you were growing up? Did you play any organized sports in high school?
Yeah, I played football. I played basketball. I played baseball. 1 year I played baseball and ran track, and it's the same. See, that was hard. I just tried to stay out of the house. I was pretty social. Sports came easy to me. It was just more of me like trying to hone things rather than digest, a playbook or perfect a throw, whatever it is, or, tactile thing. And it was, we grew up, water skiing and jet skiing. I remember my stepdad throwing me out of the boat when I was probably 6, maybe younger than that. We were in a lake in Oklahoma, and he just like basically like, "You're gonna learn how to swim today." And I'm like, "Yeah, that sounds fun." I didn't realize he was gonna like throw me in the lake.
Oh shit.
And it was this muddy. What lake was that? It was Lake Draper or Lake Thunderbird. It was outside of Oklahoma City, and it was like this muddy. You can't see anything. It's like swimming in like chocolate milk almost. But
did you swim?
I swam. I did not sink. I swam. Turns out I was a pretty decent swimmer.
We all kid about doing that with our kids, but occasionally it really happens, huh?
Yeah, but no, in high school I was very, I actually started learning some lessons in high school, and I hadn't really put a whole lot of stock into that until I kind of started just, when you reflect on things, just the crowd, I was kind of, I was liked by everyone. I hung out with most of the guys from athletics, from sports and stuff like that, but I was everyone's friend. And when I was younger, like junior high, I actually got in a little bit of trouble and for fighting and stuff like that. And my parents put me in Catholic school for almost 4 years at SPPS, St. Peter and Paul School. And that didn't help with that. It just was, just really, really strict. When I got into high school, I saw a really bad bullying incident from a buddy of mine had done. And it really just kind of shook me. And it was beginning of my sophomore year of high school. And that was basically when I kind of started like sticking up for people. And that's when I really like had a heart for fighting for people that need help. And my little brother, Josh, he struggled. He was low birth weight, and he's on the shorter end of the spectrum, and just wasn't athletic, and just things didn't come easy to him. And I stuck up for him a lot. And I, harbored a lot of feelings for me thriving and him not, and, kind of going through that as a teenager, and, your mom struggling with those kind of things as well. But I've always just rooted for the underdog. I've always wanted to see, like, I want everyone to eat. I want everyone to eat dinner. I may not want everyone eating at my dinner table with me, but I want everyone to eat.
Right.
Everyone.
That's a great sentiment. I'm with you. Connie fusses at me a little bit sometimes because, the good Lord has blessed us with enough financial funds to contribute to certain groups. And the bad side is once you contribute to one, they sell your name, and then, you'll get like 1,000 solicitations. The only mail I get is either bills or organizations want me to donate to them now. But the organizations that we always stick with, and there's 3 every month that we donate to, are all food banks. Because I agree, nobody should go hungry in our country. This is the freaking United States. Nobody should be going hungry in our country.
And you've been to a lot of countries. I know. I've been to all over 80 plus countries, and the hunger, some of the problems in some of these parts of the world, it's very easy to have a very American lens on things. Especially if you grew up, and it's not some people's fault that they didn't travel when they were growing up. I didn't travel. Us traveling was going to Texas and hanging out for 3 or 4 days, and, jet skiing and, water skiing and kneeboarding on a lake with our cousins and stuff like that. We didn't go to like Europe, or didn't go to South America. I didn't get exposed to that, and to some of like just how real and sad certain things are in the world until I joined the military. And there's a lot of that out there. I mean, there's a lot of places that they just don't have the same position that we have. So like I said, it's easy to have that American lens on things.
Yeah. And some of our listeners have heard me say this before. If I was a dictator of the United States for a day, I would require every American to go live in a third world country for at least a year and then come back and tell me how bad we are. I lived in Colombia for 3 years. Yeah. It's a beautiful country. It's not so, it's a little bit third world, but it's more progressive than most third world countries. It's just beautiful. It's my favorite country in the world after the United States. But later in my career, the administrator of DEA offered me to go back as the boss of Colombia and a couple other countries down in South America. And it was a big deal. But I told her, I said, what living overseas did for me? It made me appreciate living in the United States. So thank you, but no thank you. It's crazy. And that's Murph getting off on a tangent there.
Speaking about tangents, and since you brought up Murph, I got to ask, I keep looking at the Narcos in the background. Did you get any say in who they cast for your character in the series on Netflix?
None whatsoever. It's funny because they would send us, they would go to these casting companies, and I mean, they were sending us, Jake Gyllenhaal, they're looking at Jake Gyllenhaal, or they're looking at Armie Hammer, or I mean, most of these people I didn't know because I'm not real big into TV and movies, but some of them you look at their picture like, oh yeah, I've seen this guy a lot. And I think they just did it so we wouldn't call him. But they ended up hiring a guy named Boyd Holbrook, who I think did a fantastic job. He and I have stayed friends. We stay in touch. In fact, he's going to do a little thing for me here we had him on as a guest here on Game of Crimes, and he's going to do a little intro for me here in the not too distant future, I'm thinking. So, but what'd you think of him?
I've worked with a lot of agency guys, when we were active duty, doing that kind of stuff and this, that, and the other. I think they did a good job. There's some some guys have, a little John Wayne in them, and obviously you gotta sex it up. Every explosion has to be a fireball. They'd never listen to a military advisor on the set because they're like, look, the investors, we got to make money because they invested all this. We got to make everything explosion super gnarly. We're like, okay, I got it. But yeah, I think they did a good job. It's funny. I'm a narration guy. I like the story. I really enjoyed the show, not for any reason. This sounds weird, but I really enjoyed Dexter because the narration.
Yeah. All right.
Series about a guy that worked at Miami-Dade in forensics, and but he was a serial killer that only killed like bad people.
Well,
yeah.
Well, is that a bad thing? I don't know. We have to think about that. Okay, let's move on. The funny thing about Boyd,
he kind of took justice into his own hands.
Yeah. When we did Boyd's interview towards the end, he said, "Hey, I just want to tell you guys something and I never knew this. Every day he would shave his hairline to give him a receding hairline." I'm like, dude, you could have gone the rest of my life without telling me that. I don't need to know that. I mean, what a guy, man. He was fantastic. And the other thing is we learned in dealing with Netflix and they were very good to us. I'm not complaining about them, but what we found out is Hollywood will never let the truth get in the way of telling a good story now, will they?
Yeah, we can talk for about so many examples of, movies or shows and what really from people that were really there and what happened. And yeah. So you gotta put butts in seats. And the only way you put butts in seats is to make it super sexy. Fight scenes and fireballs and all that stuff.
Oh, well, neither one of, the thing I don't understand, and they did this in Griselda, the 4-6 part series that just came out. That was the same executive producer that did Narcos, Eric Newman, and it was on Netflix also. And every scene, the first thing that either Javier and I do or the cops do in Griselda is light a cigarette. Neither one of us smoked. We smoked cigars occasionally. We didn't smoke cigarettes. I guess that's supposed to be the sexy thing in Hollywood,
Everyone is that they're trying to make it feel like it was like, that time frame.
Man, it's crazy. All right, let's get back to you here. When you were in high school, how were your grades and did you have any plans? Were you going to go to college? What were your plans to do after high school?
My plans, I really didn't have much of a plan. I always thought I would be an athlete. Didn't work out, got in some trouble. My grades, not bad trouble, just, silly trouble. My grades were, I was pretty much like a C student, and that's because I did not do homework.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I was just, again, it was, I could just sit in the class, half pay attention when I knew when I needed to focus and knew when I could just take a nap and drool for a second or, do whatever, go to Walmart and start daydreaming about something. But I was always a good test taker. In the military, you test for promotion in the Air Force. I've always been good at taking tests. If you just kind of look at it and do some problem solving and process elimination and pay attention to words or whatever, there's some psychology behind tests, and I helped with some of that stuff in the military with developing part of a career field for a new officer career fields. Some of it made sense. I was like, I didn't realize I was doing those things. I was doing quite a few of these principles about not changing answers and, too long to be wrong sometimes on an answer when there's a lot of information. You're like, yeah, that all makes sense. Like, yeah, they're doing that to kind of trick you up sometimes, like psychologically with that test. Was always just liked by my teachers. So that bought me some grace. My daughter picked up that habit, and we noticed that with her going through high school that she kind of used it to, to kind of manipulate it a little bit. Maybe I did too, but, yeah, it was just, was well liked, but I've always been well liked by, the staff, the faculty, the whoever, people at church, whatever. Just, I try to be very outgoing. I try to be genuine and real. And some people may not be okay with that and may not understand that, but, we just live in a world that, I don't know. I think just watching the dynamics of my parents' marriage at a young age, I realized that there's what people see, right? There could be the facade, and then there can also be like the reality, the truth somewhere in the middle. But I just kind of learned how to navigate through the dynamics of that home life with my father. He was an Air Force veteran, and he was a lot of pain from his service. Just he was taking pain pills a lot, and there's a lot of them arguing. So I just learned to navigate through and kind of hide in plain sight, if you will, at a young age, basically just kind of blending in, but never really applied myself with my academics, was able to just go in and get a high B on a test and keep that, strong C average and not, get any kind of academic situation where I might, not get to play in athletics, basically.
Yeah. I got to tell you, when we first met, I was more talking to Jenna because she had done the talk and she was talking about the unsung heroes. We kind of had that in common. And she introduced me to you, and I think you were being respectful.
There at the hotel,
kind of
right?
Quiet at the time. Pardon?
Yeah, it was at the hotel lobby, I think. It was the evening at like 10 o'clock at night, right? Something like that.
Yeah, it was late. That's like way past my bedtime. Just so you know.
I believe y'all were sitting there at the benches, and some of your friends, right there. And I think it was the first time. I think it was. I was also just being around a lot of people. And granted, even though it was a bunch of veterans, I felt, did you feel, when was the last time you felt that safe?
Probably when I go to the DEA Academy and speak there.
Yeah.
Which was just like a month ago.
Yeah. And so just some of my struggles, is I stay so turned on, and I'm putting on I'm doing business development, or I'm, just kind of like doing how I navigate atmospherics and situations. It's like at the end of the day, I'm like just kind of talked out sometimes, a lot of times. And also, I get such a bad relationship as Beautiful. I don't know if y'all can see that's Jenna. I outkicked my coverage. Seriously, I don't know, Steve, what I did to deserve this. Doing better than I deserve, that's for sure, brother.
You know what happened. The good man upstairs took care of it.
Being in certain situations, it will drain me. Yeah. Yeah. Like just not that I'm hyper vigilant, but just, just certain things just kind of change you and just change the way when I came in and started peeling back some of the layers and some of the problems in the world that we talked about here in a little bit with air recovery. Once you start seeing some of these things, you've seen them. So you start looking at the world way different. You start looking at the person across at a restaurant maybe a little differently, just based off some indicators or something that maybe a trigger that you may notice is like kind of like not a normal pattern of life, or just, you just can't turn that part of you off. Yeah, I was probably a little quiet, a little ready just to go, like, chill out. And we also keep a very high operational tempo at Air Recovery. We train a lot. We engage with our donors and supporters. We deploy for disaster responses all over the planet. We combat human trafficking. We stay fit. We have a hard time sitting still. We try sitting on our hands, but they'll just fail. Yeah, hard to sit still. Yeah, it almost like, I was just talking about this, about, trying to pour from an empty cup, because if you don't pour back into yourself, you're not going to have anything to pour out and to help other people. And you almost get to where when you're running at a high pace, when you try to sit still, you kind of like trying to get your sea legs back. Trying to get your land legs back when you get off a boat. I don't know. Sometimes I find, I don't know if it's the same with you, but I have a hard time sitting still, or if like, so Jenna's gone at a thing with Women Connect. She does so many things. And, after our podcast, I'll probably hang out with Zachary. I mean, I could go down. I've got a lot of friends, that I could go see some really cool live music in Nashville. Come to town. We'll go see some fun stuff. And we won't have to go to Broadway to do either, Steve. But I almost forgot like how to hang out, because I don't go out and like really drink anymore. I can have a couple drinks, but that's part of my military story. Military is a big culture. It's a big drinking, culture of drinking.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, it really is. And it's the same in the law enforcement field. It's, what I tell people is what cops like to do is drink beer and tell war stories. And in retirement, you live vicariously through what everybody else does. And I don't drink alcohol anymore. So I tell a lot of war stories. That's called a speaking business. But when you're graduating high school, was military on your radar, or did your dad suggest that, or how'd you get interested in especially the Air Force?
He actually did. Yeah, he actually did. And he told me about the Air Force. The Air Force had, interesting. There's some special operations jobs in the Air Force that people really don't know about, or jobs where you do, not your typical Air Force type thing. And I chose that path. Because you to go in and be a Green Beret, I had to go in. They didn't have an X-ray program when I was enlisting, which was where you could go straight into special forces. You had to go and be an infantryman first, and that's not a ding on infantrymen. I was just kind of like, I want to do it now. And I was impatient. Mm-hmm. I was high performer. I wanted. I don't need to wait for that. I'm ready for it now. And the Air Force gave me the track to do that with becoming a TAC-P and getting JTAC qualified and deploying a lot and doing some good things and being gone a lot, sometimes knowing, when I would be back in Afghanistan again before I even left Afghanistan to go home. I would knew like where I'd be back and where I'd be. So I start doing some intel on like that battle space. Like, I'm going to be 2 villages over next time or whatever it is. And I start just kind of doing little, just on the Google machine and getting familiar with whatever. Just, all right. You didn't shut off. It was a machine there for a while, and we were doing Iraq and Afghanistan.
Well, how old were you when you went in the Air Force?
19. I just turned 19.
And where do you go to boot camp in the Air Force?
Lackland Air Force Base.
Was it
Lackland Air Force Base? Sorry.
Was it a lot of fun?
Yeah. Oddly enough, I was just preparing. Obviously when I graduated, I still kept running and working out with my cousin and everything, and just. When I realized I was going to join the military, I was like, all right, let me step it up. I actually got in worse shape in basic training.
Wow, really?
It was opposite for me. I felt like we were eating all the time. I was eating sometimes when I wasn't hungry. We would run. I mean, I think, and granted, this isn't a ding on Air Force people, but I want to say like maybe the first week you ran you ran for 10 minutes and they like blew a whistle and you ran back or whatever it was, or I forget. But it was like, it wasn't very hard. It was very much a build you up. And I was used to, going on a 5-6 mile run. I was used to, going and crushing a bunch of pull-ups or practicing doing flutter kicks or, this, that, and the other, doing very functional things. I actually just, my physical conditioning actually got, it lessened while I was in basic training. And then, you start the real stuff after basic. Air Force basic training it's hard in some ways because they just throw a bunch of information. They're like one to check your intellect and like gauge you in different areas. Obviously the Marine Corps boot camp is designed differently because the Marine Corps mission is different, just like the Army and the Navy. But the thing about the tactical career field in the Air Force is you're in the Air Force, but you're stationed on Army posts. You're going to Army schools. You're you're living there with the guys. But you're still the one Air Force guy. So I always had to try to out Army the Army or try to out Navy the Navy, because I was Griff. I was the the close air support guy. I was the guy that was there to break in case of emergency if you need to get out of a bad situation or sometimes. But again, that was building me learning how to navigate different dynamics, different atmospherics. Each team is different. It's different working with the 101st than it is working with an ODA or with a SEAL platoon or SEAL team, anything like that. So, I was in a position to learn a lot of different languages, see a lot of different things, and see how other units and organizations and some very elite people, how they operated. We did a lot of good stuff, a lot of training, and did a lot of drinking and a lot of bad decision making in the process, and had kids, at a young age. Had my son Kyle when I was 24, June 4th, 2001. And then you remember what happened a couple months after that, 9/11.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So being a close air support guy, we were super busy. That's basically 9/11 was what started bringing a lot of attention to the Air Force side of special tactics, special warfare, I think is what they're called now. Special warfare. The name changes and I'm retired. That's not who I am. That's a part of my story. Mm-hmm. And that prepared me, honestly, and Jeremy Locke and, the team, the guys, the core of air recovery, our training in the military, it really, it's amazing how easy it is to work in the humanitarian space, responding to disasters and, all over the planet and doing some of these things and helping combat human trafficking because you're able to see things differently. We play chess. We're thinking 3 dimensions when a lot of people they're not thinking that third step ahead. To the units that I work with before, and I say this all the time, I would prefer to work with an ODA if I could choose who I would deploy with because they're amazing problem solvers. They're the best planners, and from your experience, piss poor planning equals a piss poor plan. A lot of these movies are because there was really bad plans, and then Hollywood makes it look super sexy and cool, and you're like, that's not really how that happened, but okay. Yeah. But, it's, again, Green Berets are amazing trainers, they're amazing operators, and they're some of the best planners on the planet. I would go into any situation with a well-trained Green Beret. I trust it.
You mentioned ODA. Tell our listeners what that is.
ODA is an Operational Detachment Alpha, Special Forces A team, which I had the luxury of, working with those guys a little bit. So it was very fun. And, being stationed at Campbell, you're right there. The Special Forces group is there. The 160th is there. And it's kind of funny because Jenna's ex was, in the 160th. Interesting. Fun. It's funny that I listened to the podcast, earlier, but yeah, like our story is pretty funny. And it's one of those kind of like, you can't control what happens. All you can control is how you react to what happens. And when our worlds collided, we fell, head over heels in love. And we've not looked back, and we want to try to be role models for other couples, and we want to just be impactful, and I just love her to death. I love you, baby.
Yeah, then you are more than welcome to say that all day long here. I think the world of you guys. When you're talking about the tactical, so you mentioned ACP, Tactical Air Control Party. And I got this out of an article. I had to look it up to see what it was. It's an officer directs lethal and non-lethal joint firepower anywhere, anytime that the battle calls for it. Now so you got to be right up front in the action, right? You got to be out there where you can.
Yeah.
Are you pointing a laser?
Sometimes, yeah. Oddly enough, like that, like the headset that you sent me, I would have dual communications. So I would have maybe, however I had it set up with my push to talk. So in my left ear, I might be hearing, a bunch of Army guys or a bunch of Marines. And in this year, I might be hearing 10 to 15 different aircraft from, helicopters, rotary wings, sometimes from 1,000 feet above ground level up to 30,000 feet. And I'm deconflicting all of any JTAC. There's a reason why we had such a high operational tempo. And why I said earlier that I would know when I would be back in Afghanistan, or if I was in Iraq, I knew I'd be in Afghanistan, blah, 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 before I even got home, to be home for 6 months to get ready to go again. 6 months on, 6 months off, 6 months on, 6 months off. It was years like that. We digressed, though.
That's okay.
So we had, communications, and you've got to see. So to bring in precision effects, right? Because you don't request ammunition, you request an effect. So if the ground commander is us authorizing me as the JTAC, Joint Terminal Attack Controller, and we at the time had a special experience identifier. It's a DoD SEI 914. It's a special experience identifier that means you're qualified to call in close air support in close proximity to friendly forces, and we're experts at doing that stuff. So you've got to be at a vantage point where you can have eyes on the target. So what that means is you're engaged in whatever those Green Berets are doing or those infantrymen are doing, and you're engaged in what's actually happening. But then also you've got the aerial view, as we like to call it with aerial recovery. It's having the bigger view on things. With all the aircraft, all the sensors, and, able to make an ODA with a JTAC when Afghanistan first happened, the combat controllers and the soft TAC Ps that were in there doing that stuff were doing amazing work. And they were, talk about being a force multiplier, and Green Berets that's what they were great at training and, grooming force multipliers in other countries and stuff like that. The skill set's pretty unique in being multitasking and always having to navigate it differently, and, speaking different languages. A lot of training, a lot of deployments. I got married when I was 3. Shortly after, got pregnant with Kyle, my oldest. And Kyle, he received an autism diagnosis when we were in Alaska. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But just kept the operational tempo up. 9/11 happens 3 months after Kyle's born. And you know what that meant? We were gone a lot, all the time. And when we were home, we were training. Got pregnant with Caitlin, my daughter, who just turned 21. I just kept the operational tempo up, and you had spoke about it earlier. What had disintegrated the marriage was you grow apart. And at that point I was gone more than I was home. You understand too. The 6 months we were home there for a while. We were home for 6 months, gone for at least 6 months. Right. The 6 months that you're home, we would get home and we would turn in some sensitive items and do some out processing, maybe do an intel out brief. And then they'd give us, 10 days, 2 weeks off work, stay in the local area, decompress, reintegrate with your family. That 15th day or whatever it was, when you'd come back in, you would basically go straight back in. You go into deployment preparation. So the 6 months that I was home, I would train. I'd go out to Arizona, would go to Southern California, we traveled to these close air support bombing ranges all over the country. Fighter and bomber aircraft and rotary wing attack helicopters would come in, and we'd practice doing close air support, train, sweat, bleed, and, training here in, when you're CONUS, when you're in the United States and garrison, so that when it matters, you're ready to go. And you're ready to do that at the, the highest level of readiness that you can be, because they're counting on the guy to your left and right, just like they're counting on you. And, they're counting on the JTAC to be that belly button to help sometimes get out some pretty gnarly situations.
It's, you're literally holding American service personnel and allied personnel, their lives in your hand. Being a JTAC officer brings multitasking to a whole new level. I don't know. It's got to take a lot of practice to master that. Multiple radios, one in one ear and the other in the other ear. And you got ground forces, you got air forces up. I can't imagine going through the stress level must be through the ceiling.
Yeah. Looking back, it was stressful. You miss it. You look at some of the, your training and some of the stuff you did in the DEA, like some of the crummier situations actually are like some of the more fun and your best memories and like fun stories. Yeah. Some of the controlled, the chaos that you controlled and brought order to or whatnot. Yeah.
Or that you simply
that's what we'll be thinking about, Yeah.
It gets crazy.
Here's the story. I wanted to clarify. I was not an officer. I was enlisted. But there are officers in the TACP career field. I did actually help develop that career field there for a little bit with a couple of TDYs. But I was an enlisted guy.
Gotcha. I didn't mean to insult you like that.
Oh, no, it's okay. I was pretty insulting. No, I'm kidding.
Well, you were talking about having that special training where you could call in a close airstrike. We had Jason Redmond on here. You met Jason. You may have already known Jason at the Military Appreciation Weekend, but I read his book and then had him on the show here, and that's they had to do that. I mean, they were,
Yep.
and the pilots were just saying, no, 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 no. And then they finally went to somebody that had your qualification to get the authorization. I guess you have to issue a special code when you authorize it or whatever, and it relieves them of any responsibility.
Yeah. So if you're calling in, I want to say this the right way. If you're calling in and you're requesting a weapon effect and it's really, really close to friendly forces, there's a high probability of there being there being some fratricide, of there being some weapons effects that degrades your ability to operate afterward. And some of our training, we knew how close we could be to a bomb in meters. If we were laying down, if we were like, hey, I need you to hug dirt now and get down the prone and you're in a helmet and you're covering up, just get as low as you can. We knew like, oh, I can be about 2 football fields away from that bomb. And there's a, 1% chance that we'll be degraded and not be able to, continue the mission for a couple minutes. That's crazy.
That's why they call it Danger Close.
Yeah. There's actually a book called Danger Close. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a movie out also.
Yeah. I'm not sure. I'm sure it's probably based loosely on the same thing, but yeah, a lot of those guys are my friends in that book.
So I read this about you. Between 2002 and 2012, you did 7 deployments to Afghanistan and Iraq, and those were 6-month deployments, right?
Yeah. I had one deployment that was a year. It was like towards the end of the marriage when things just weren't good and stuff. I kind of volunteered. I took one for the team and took one so that another guy would not have to come, and be away from his family for 6 months in that leadership position. But yeah, it was a lot of deployments.
So we are certainly not going to say anything disparaging about your first wife. It's until you walk in somebody's shoes, don't try to judge them. That's the way I look at it. But you're coming home, and it's very similar to Jenna's first marriage. You're coming home, you're there, but you're really not there. Mm-hmm. You're still in Afghanistan or Iraq. You're preparing to go back. Yeah, I know where your focus is. I'm the same way. If I've got something coming up, I hear about it at home, but we just celebrated our 40th wedding anniversary last week, so I think this marriage is probably going to last a while. Although Connie likes to point out that if she had killed me a long time ago, she'd have got out in 20 years. She'd have been free for the last 20 years. I don't know what that says about me. But now, how was your first wife handling this? Were you catching a lot of grief from her? And I'm going to say rightfully so, because I love her unsung heroes.
Yes. And I want to speak to that too, because I want to speak to that, make sure we don't skip over that. So, I mean, you get used to it. You get used to what kind of a rhythm, she didn't work. She just stayed at home. We were very fortunate in that we received some extra pays and stuff. It wasn't like thousands and thousands of dollars, but with you jump out of planes, you get paid a little bit more. We got special duty pays and we got pretty big reenlistment bonus, pretty big ones, to be honest. And if you did that in a tax-free zone, your $100 plus sometimes $1,000 bonus would not be taxed. Mm-hmm. She liked the reenlistment bonuses, obviously. Didn't really care for me being gone. So. Mm-hmm. But you kind of get used to, like, it feels like almost at a point where if I was home too long there towards the end of it, where we were just basically like business partners and, raising the Griffith kids LLC, that's literally all we were for probably the last 6 years of our marriage. And I feel bad about that, but it happened. And, the children suffer, like you said when we were talking with Jenna, with split ups, and you don't divorce your kids. Sometimes you do things because you realize it's affecting your parenting, and you're going to be a better, healthier parent if you can get some healing and you can remove some toxic stuff. Because that's what happened. Is I realized it was affecting my parenting. So it did take a toll on our marriage. You can't say it doesn't. Jenna wrote Service and Soul because the military family has to digest and has to process and unpackage a lot of different nuances like the DEA family does that the Walmart family doesn't. So, and that's not to say that the Walmart family won't encounter some stressors and a crappy day at work, but a crappy day at work at 7-Eleven is different than a crappy day at work being a DEA agent or, being a humanitarian special operator or an active duty, joint term attack controller or an infantryman or what have you. So, we went through it. We were one of the families why Jenna wrote the book, because the families, they sit back there and it's not their job just to be waiting around. We're the ones that are heralded. There's promotion ceremonies at our units, the change of command, commanders talk, this, that, and the other. And then they talk about the families of the people retiring for like 2 seconds, give them some roses maybe and a plaque. They just need support. The families need support. Like I said too, it's a culture of drinking. As long as you don't get a DUI in the military, and I became basically a functioning alcoholic, during my career, because you don't have that kind of operational tempo. You don't see those sorts of things. You don't go straight from chaos in Afghanistan or Iraq to a transatlantic flight, and then you come home and you're automatically super dad and super son and super husband. No, we don't have an on-off switch. And when it was like the yo-yo effect, I mean, it was a lot of guys. Your identity when you're doing that is so in that, because you're in life or death situations every 6 months, and then when you're home for 6 months, you're training to go do that while you're so crappy to say, but you're almost like trying to find time to be a dad and be a husband.
Right.
And that's not right. And so the families, they have to unpackage and deal with a dynamic that is just, veterans and first responders. Let me say this: law enforcement officers, our medics, our firemen, forestry, firefighters. These guys do this every day. A law enforcement officer could get shot at by Americans on our own streets every day, potentially. And when I walk around here, I feel pretty safe. If I see a cop, I'm glad. I taught my kids to respect law enforcement officers. They're your friends. You know why? Because if you're not breaking the law, you need help, call them. Yep. If you didn't have cops, try calling a crackhead, see if they'll come help you. They're not. But I hate all that stuff. But it definitely is a needed and a missing niche. And Jen and I talked about it. I wonder how many, if there would have been like a service and soul, or there was more of a focus on this in the DEA and in law enforcement and in the fire departments and in the military, if there was more focus on the families, if there would have been 30 years ago, how many marriages could have potentially been saved? Yeah, it was suicides potentially averted.
It was when I got into law enforcement starting in 1975, and it was when traumatic events happened, you were expected to suck it up and get back out on the street. Counseling was unheard of. And then I came on DEA in 87 and 89, we got in a shooting, a little gun battle there in Hialeah, Florida, a suburb of Miami. And my partner was hit twice in the bedroom. We're fighting from a bedroom, shooting at a guy out in the hallway. And as the guy's making his escape, he shoots the informant right in the throat. So he died. Kevin got hit. My partner got hit twice in the right arm with 45 caliber slugs and kept his arm, believe it or not. But when that was over, the DEA didn't come to me and tell me, hey, you need to go to counseling, you need to do this, do that. It's like, okay, you can take a couple of days and get your butt back in here. And
we trained you how to be resilient.
Yeah. And you know what? It didn't. I've been in a lot of shootings in my career in 38 years, but none of them ever bothered me except the one when my partner was shot. And I didn't go to counseling. And when a senior agent came to me one day, he's like, Murph, did you go to counseling? And I said, no, and I'm not going. He's like, get your butt in there. You got to do it. And of course I didn't. And that was in 89. I retired in 2013. Until the day I retired from DEA, I still had dreams, not nightmares, but I still had dreams about Kevin shooting, just reliving it over in your mind. And they became less and less as the years went on. And then when I retired from DEA, I haven't had the dream since. Back in your situation, so you're in an extremely high stress situation there as a combat controller, basically. And now you come home and you got the family pressure. So did you recognize that at the time as post-traumatic stress syndrome, or you just think, man, I can't wait to get back overseas. This is too much.
Couldn't wait to get home and drink. I couldn't wait to, you basically, we self-medicated.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it's a culture. I'm not trying to bash anything. I'm just saying it's a culture of drinking. I mean, we would drink it. We would have a hail and farewell when we would, hail in the new people in the unit, and we would say farewell to the brothers that we deployed with and did great things, and we'd hug and cry and say goodbye and stuff like that. And we'd drink. You'd go to an intel brief on Friday afternoon and talk about what parts of the world, where the focus was, and you'd leave and you'd be like, and you drink. Because you realize like how close a lot of places are to becoming just a dumpster fire, but it's a heavy drinking, and because as long as you can do your job, as long as you don't get a DUI, which I almost did, just don't get in trouble. Drink, but don't get caught.
Hey players, this is the end of part 1. As you know, part 2 comes out tomorrow on a Tuesday. In the meantime, on social media, go and check us out on X at Game of Crimes and on Facebook and Instagram at Game of Crimes Podcast. Also on Facebook, type in Game of Crimes fan page and join us for some more fun. Our website is gameofcrimespodcast.com. We've got a lot more information there, including all our episodes, the book list, which contains the books written by our guests, Game of Crimes merchandise, and a lot more. In the meantime, everybody stay safe. We'll see you tomorrow for part 2.